Hello everyone, we are now back to our fantastic Flask tutorials. So as you see here, I'm back in our original Flask directory and we have activated our virtual environment for Flask. What we need to do now, we're going to actually create our first little web page in Flask. We need to actually create our directories here. Now, the original tutorial that I linked to in the first video has us do this a little different way, so if you're following this video along with that, things do kind of diverge here in a strange way. I am actually not going to use the Flask folder that we made as a subfolder, but rather where we just hold our entire little microblog that we're creating. So let's get right into it. We need to make a couple new directories. The first one of which is called app. To do this, we just type mkdir app. Next, we need a temp directory. And then we need to actually create some folders inside of our app directory. The first one being static. Sorry, on Windows we got to actually go in. So we'll cd into app. The first directory we need to make inside of the app folder is static. This is where we will put images, CSS files, and JavaScript files, things like that that don't change. Also not Python files typically. Now the second folder we're going to make is templates. Now templates we will go over probably in the next video. They're very essential to all web frameworks, and in Flask we can actually do some really crazy stuff with that, and they're essentially the HTML templates that we will use, but we will use special things to kind of have those dynamically filled and populated by Flask and our Python files. So once you have that done, we're going to actually open up this here directory in our favorite text editor. I will be using Sublime. So here we are. Perfect. So we are actually going to make a little init file, and we're just going to create our Flask object here. So after you have your Flask modules and dependencies and all that installed, we can actually just say from Flask import Flask. I know, really simple. Next thing is we need to actually define an object that is a Flask object, and we're just going to call that object app because of originality. Now, Flask takes a parameter, and that parameter will be the name. Name is important because it's going to actually be something that references the file itself. Because this is just going to be in a init file, it's actually going to reference the folder that's inside of as the name of the module, which in this case will be app. Now the next line, this will be kind of a weird thing if you're used to Python. We're going to actually then do another import and say from app import views. The reason we do this is because in our views file, we're actually going to also import this file. And if we don't do this at the bottom, it'll actually create this infinite loop of importing one another, which Python tends to not like. Once that's done, you can just save that. We're going to again save this as an init file. One second. We are going to name this an init file. So the syntax for that is going to be underscore init underscore dot py. And there we go, our fancy little init file. Now the next thing we need to do is actually create a views file. Now views is going to be what actually tells our framework in Flask where to route the user when a URL is requested. So let's go over here, and we're just going to create a new file, and I'm going to name it views.py. So this is also going to be a pretty small file. We're going to import our app object from the app module that we are currently in. Oops. Import app. And then the next thing we need to do is define a method for our index page. The method for that I'm just going to call index to keep things simple. And we're going to have it return the HTML we want to show the user. In this case, we're just going to have it say hello world. So return hello world. Now, this would be all fine and dandy, but there's actually one last thing we got to do, and that's we have to use a Flask decorator around our method to actually tell Flask to direct the user to this specific function when they go to the index page. And it's really simple. It's a thing called a route in Flask, and you just say @app or whatever your Flask object is, in our case app, dot, and then we're going to say route, and then in here pass the URL. Now the URL for the index is usually just a slash. Sometimes even people will do a /index. So now if we go to either of those URLs for our little framework in Flask, we should get the words hello world to appear. There's a couple of things we got to do. First, we have to actually get our server to run. Flask provides its own little standalone server, so we're going to use that. Now, to do that, that part is a little bit different. So we're going to want to actually go, we're going to want to go back into here, and we want to go back just a little bit so that we have this app folder inside as a subdirectory of where we're making our current file. So I'm going to make another folder inside of our Flask folder, a new file inside of our Flask folder, and this one is just going to simply be called run.py, and this is the file that will actually run our scripts and our framework. So this is just going to import app from app, and then it's going to contain one more line of code, and that is app.run debug equals true. Now app.run of course is going to actually run our app for us so that we can access it through the web browser as any user would if we had this on a production server. Debug equals true, however, is going to actually make it so that if there are any errors that occur, we see those errors in our web browser. This makes debugging a lot easier, but it's also very dangerous to do on a production server because it can give people access to information if something goes wrong. If they crash a web page and for some reason your database password is used in that code somewhere, you may actually just dump your database password onto the screen for anyone to use, which is generally not what you want your users to have access to. So after you have that, you can just say Control-S to save that. We're going to go back into our command prompt here. If we list what's in this directory, we should now see our run.py. If we do python run.py, it will actually run our server. Cool. So once you see this, it'll give you a address to go to see your website. So let's pull that up over here in Google Chrome. We can just say localhost :5000 for the port that this is running on, and we see hello world. So that is your basics for a hello world application in Flask. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you would like to see future videos, please press that subscribe button so that you will be notified for any new videos. If you like this video, please press that thumbs up button. Helps me know that you like these videos and would like to see more in the future. If you have any questions, leave them in the comment section below, and have a wonderful day.